Welcome to Dusky Lore. Close your eyes, dim the lights, and listen closely as the shadows begin to speak. Story 1. A few years ago, I bought my first house in a small and quiet town. It was an old, colonial-style two-story construction. Nothing luxurious, but the price was reasonable, and it had a good-sized garden. After spending years living in rented apartments, finally having a place of my own felt incredible. The previous owner, a retired professor named Alan Foster, had lived there for decades before moving south to be closer to his family. The house had a particular charm, although it showed the passage of time, dark wooden floors, creaky stairs, and a large master room on the upper floor. Over the following months, I dedicated myself to repairs and improvements. I painted walls, changed lamps and fixtures, and little by little the place started to feel truly mine. By mid-August, I had already accumulated quite a few objects I didn't need. Old furniture, dishes, some tools. So I decided to organize a garage sale. It seemed like a good way to clear space and at the same time, meet some neighbors. The morning of the sale dawned sunny and, by 9, the heat was already noticeable. I set up tables along the garage entrance, stacked boxes with assorted items, and placed some large articles, chairs, lamps, near the curb. The flow of visitors was constant, neighbors who stopped to chat and buyers who took one thing or another. Around 11, I noticed an older woman walking slowly from the end of the street. She wore a somewhat faded floral dress and her gray hair was carefully tied up. She caught my attention because I had never seen her before, and the town was so small that you usually recognized everyone. She didn't stop to look at the tables or the objects. She came directly toward me. She stopped in front of the house and looked at it with a thoughtful gaze. "Do you live here now?" she asked me in a soft, slightly hoarse voice. "Yes," I replied, feeling strangely uncomfortable under her gaze. "I moved in a few months ago." She nodded slowly, without taking her eyes off the house. "I used to take care of the children who lived here. A long time ago," she said, and then she stared at me, with eyes that were clear but distant. "You should check under the floorboards, in the master room." Not everything was found. Before I could ask her what she meant by that, she turned around and began to walk away at an unhurried pace, as if she had already said everything necessary. I called after her, but she didn't respond even once. In a matter of seconds, she disappeared down the street, leaving me standing under the sun, confused and with a strange uneasiness in my chest. The rest of the sale passed without incident, but her words kept echoing in my head. That night, when everything was over and I gathered up the remnants of the day, curiosity got the best of me. What did she mean by not everything was found? I went up to the master room and began to tap the floor gently with my foot, trying to hear any difference in sound. After several attempts, I got to the closet. There, the boards sounded hollower than in the rest of the room. I hesitated for a moment, but then I knelt down and carefully pressed on the wood. One of the boards gave slightly, enough to lift it with my hands. My heart began to pound as I removed the board. Underneath, covered by a thin layer of dust and bits of insulation, there was a small bundle wrapped in a dark cloth. I took a deep breath and, with trembling hands, pulled it out. It was heavier than I expected, and the fabric felt old, brittle. I unfolded one corner, and what I saw made my blood run cold. They were small bones, not very large, but also not something you would find by accident. That had been placed there intentionally. I dropped the bundle immediately, my heart racing. Who would hide bones under the floorboards? Without wasting time, I grabbed my phone and called the town police. In less than half an hour, 2 officers arrived at the place. They took photographs, placed the small bundle into an evidence bag, and carefully checked the space under the floor, without finding anything else. They asked me several questions. When I had moved in, whether I had known the previous owner personally, or whether I had noticed anything strange since I had been living there. Unfortunately, I didn't have many answers to give them. A few days passed before they contacted me again. When they finally did, They informed me that the bones were not human. The analyses revealed that they belonged to an animal, probably a cat or a small dog. Also, they were quite old, at least 30 years, perhaps more. It was something strange, yes, but it didn't represent any crime, so they couldn't do much more. I thanked them for the information and tried to put the matter behind me, although in reality I couldn't get it out of my head. Driven by uneasiness, I decided to call the former owner, Alan Foster, to ask him if he knew anything about it. He seemed genuinely surprised. He said he had no idea there were bones or anything hidden under the floor. His voice sounded tense, uncomfortable, and he ended the call abruptly, which only increased my sense of unease. Over the following days, I immersed myself in the town hall archives, looking for any information about the house. I discovered that the property had changed owners several times over the years, with families moving in and leaving fairly often, until Foster finally settled there. I didn't find anything suspicious, only normal records of sales and moves, nothing out of the ordinary. I waited for weeks for the old woman to return, hoping to get some explanation, but she never came back. I asked the neighbors if anyone knew her, if her description sounded familiar, but no one seemed to recognize her. It was as if she had appeared only to deliver that enigmatic message to me, and then vanished without leaving a trace. It has been almost a year since that day, and I still can't stop thinking about those bones. Why would someone hide an animal's remains under the floor? How did that woman know they were there? And why did she decide to warn me precisely? But what torments me most are not those questions, but her last words, the ones I can't erase from my mind no matter how hard I try. Not everything was found. If those bones were not what she was referring to, then what else could be hidden under my feet, in the silent shadows of this old house? Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to press the subscribe button and activate the bell icon to stay up to date with our upcoming horror stories. Your support means so much to us, so please share these stories with your friends and family. Thank you. Story 2. In August of 2018, I decided that I needed a good camera. My iPhone worked fine, but photography was becoming a real hobby, and I wanted something better, something more professional, something I could experiment with on weekends or even use for family portraits. I lived in a quiet suburb of Portland, Oregon, in Beaverton, an area of pleasant houses and tree-lined streets, very safe. In the summer, especially toward the end of the season, it was common to see garage sales every weekend. So, on a sunny Saturday, I got up early and went out to tour the neighborhood looking for a bargain. It was around 10 when I found one house in particular, located on Cedar Hills Boulevard. It didn't have anything special. White walls, red shutters, a somewhat old ranch-style home. But the yard was full of boxes, tables with clothes, tools, and piles of assorted objects. Behind a stack of dusty books, I noticed a black DSLR camera. It was a Nikon, a decent model, though somewhat old. The woman running the sale looked like she was in her mid-40s. She looked tired, with a cup of coffee in one hand and a faraway stare. When I asked her about the camera, she gave me a strange look before murmuring, "It was my ex-husband's," she said in a low voice, looking at her cup. "Take it for $20. I want to get rid of it." $20 for a Nikon DSLR was too good of a deal to pass up. I handed her the money, thanked her, and went home feeling lucky. The camera was covered in dust, but in good condition. At home, I cleaned it, charged the battery, and turned it on. I discovered that the memory card was still inside and full of photographs. There were hundreds. Curiosity got the best of me immediately, so I sat down on the couch, with the mid-morning sun coming through the window, and started going through the images one by one. At first, everything seemed normal. Vacation photos on the coast, a dog playing fetch, family gatherings around a barbecue. But little by little, the images began to change. They became darker, more unsettling, At first, I thought the photographer might have been doing tests or had changed the camera settings, but something about those photos gave me a bad feeling. There were images taken at night, from what looked like a garden or a backyard. They were grainy photographs, full of shadows, as if someone were watching in secret through branches or a fence. After that, I saw shots of a porch, with outdoor furniture perfectly arranged. A wave of discomfort ran through my body. Those were not normal photos. They looked like surveillance, almost like spying. I kept flipping through the images, my heart speeding up more and more. In one, you could see a bedroom window, the curtains drawn and a light on inside. The next was the same room, but closer. In another, a woman was sleeping in bed, wrapped in the blankets, completely unaware that someone was photographing her. My stomach turned. This wasn't right. My hands were shaking as I kept looking. Without a doubt, someone had been spying on that woman for entire nights. And then I noticed it. Something that made a chill run through my chest. That bedroom was mine. The curtains were identical to mine, the cheap beige ones I had bought at Target a few months earlier. The same comforter pattern, the same bedside lamp. Even the book on the nightstand looked like mine. I jumped to my feet, dizzy, trying to convince myself it was a coincidence. I rushed to my bedroom, but it was impossible to deny the obvious. That bedroom in the photos was exactly my bedroom. I stood there staring at the window, realizing how easy it was to see inside at night if the curtains weren't completely closed. Who had taken those photos? And when? With my heart in my throat, I put the camera into a plastic bag, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to the police station on Griffith Drive. My hands were trembling as I told everything to a detective named Ryan Carson. He took the camera and assured me they would investigate the case. 2 days later, Detective Carson called me. His voice sounded calm, but there was a seriousness that set my nerves on edge. The camera belonged to a man named Stephen Grant, he told me. He lived in your neighborhood until 2 years ago. He was arrested in late 2016 for stalking a woman who lived nearby, but the charges were dropped due to a lack of solid evidence. After that, he disappeared. No one has seen him since. I was silent for a few seconds, trying to process what I had just heard. Finally, I managed to ask, "Did you find out anything else?" The detective paused before continuing. "We spoke with the woman who sold you the camera. It seems she wasn't completely honest with you. Stephen Grant wasn't her ex-husband. They were never married. She was his landlady. He stopped paying rent, disappeared overnight, and left all his belongings behind. She sold them off little by little. She just wanted to get rid of everything that reminded her of him." A chill ran down my spine. "But the photos," I stammered. "My bedroom." Carson cut me off in a low voice, almost sorrowful. "The date stamp on those photographs matches the last night Stephen Grant was seen alive." I froze. The air seemed to leave my lungs. That meant Grant had been outside my window, watching me sleep, 2 years ago, and no one had ever known. That same day, I changed the locks on my house. I bought thicker curtains, installed a security camera, and tried to convince myself that I was safe. But every night, when the sun went down and I pulled those curtains shut tight, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Stephen Grant had disappeared, yes, but there was no evidence that he was dead. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, hiding somewhere, maybe far away, or maybe only a few streets away. And when the night is too quiet and I feel a shadow move beyond my window, I can't help thinking that maybe he's out there again, waiting for the perfect moment to lift his camera once more. Story 3. Last July, my wife Melissa and I decided to hold a garage sale at our home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Melissa's grandfather had recently passed away, and he had left us an attic full of antiques and old furniture. Our plan was simple: sell what we could, donate the rest, and finally get our space back. The morning of the sale started out calmly. Some neighbors came by. browsing among tables filled with antique lamps, vinyl records, and dust-covered picture frames. A couple of antique collectors even stopped, asked polite questions, and negotiated prices. Everything was completely normal, at least until midday. That was when an older man, probably around 65, quietly approached our tables. He wore a worn denim jacket, his hair was gray and thinning, and he moved with a certain stiffness. Unlike the other shoppers, who usually chatted with us, this man didn't say a single word. His eyes swept quickly over the items on display until they stopped on a pair of old binoculars. They had belonged to Melissa's grandfather, probably from the 1940s. They were leather-bound and incredibly well-preserved. Without saying anything, the man picked them up carefully, turned them over in his hands, and examined them closely. I noticed his fingers trembling slightly. I tried to start a conversation, telling him a bit about their history, but he didn't respond. Instead, he pulled money from his pocket, handed me exactly the price we were asking, and left quickly, without a single word. We watched him walk away, a little uncomfortable, but we chalked it up to simple eccentricity. Garage sales attracted all kinds of people, after all. We didn't think about him again until the following weekend. It was Sunday at dusk. Melissa was washing dishes while I was preparing dinner. Suddenly, I noticed a movement in the backyard, near the back fence. At first, I assumed it was some animal, but when I focused my view better, my heart stopped. There was a man standing in the shadows, watching our house through a pair of binoculars. It took only a few seconds to recognize him. It was the same man who had bought Melissa's grandfather's binoculars. Without thinking, I ran out into the yard shouting, with Melissa right behind me. But as soon as the man heard us, he took off running toward the back, jumping the fence with surprising speed before disappearing into the gloom. We stood there, frozen, our hearts pounding, staring into the darkness of the empty yard. We discussed calling the police, but in the end we decided not to. We convinced ourselves that maybe he was just a strange neighbor, or that he had mistaken the house. However, the uneasiness didn't go away. The next few days passed without incident, but a quiet nervousness settled between us. A tension that wasn't spoken about but was there, disrupting our routine and eroding the sense of safety we had always had. The following Thursday, I was working late at the office. My phone was on silent, buried under papers on my desk. Around 10:30, as I was getting ready to go home, I checked it and froze. I had 20 missed calls from Melissa. I called her back immediately. The phone rang again and again, but she didn't answer. A wave of panic washed through me. I grabbed my keys and drove home at full speed, not thinking about traffic lights or speed limits. When I turned onto our street, I felt my heart drop. 2 police cruisers were parked in front of our house, their flashing lights lighting up the night. The front window was shattered. Fragments of glass covered the porch and the lawn. My mind filled with the worst thoughts, but relief hit me all at once when I saw her. Melissa was inside, shaking, talking with 2 officers. She explained what had happened in a broken voice. Around 9:30, she had felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching her. When she looked out, she saw him again, the same man standing by the fence, aiming the binoculars at the house. Terrified, she ran to lock the doors. But seconds later, she heard the glass break. She panicked, grabbed a kitchen knife, and dialed emergency services while she barricaded herself inside. By the time the police arrived, the man was already gone. The officers searched the area, but they found nothing. Melissa was able to describe him clearly, though without more evidence there wasn't much they could do. The next morning we installed a security system, reinforced the windows, and promised to stay more alert. Still, no matter how many precautions we took, something had broken inside us. That sense of safety we had always taken for granted no longer existed. Exactly 1 week later, when Melissa was coming home from work, she called me in a panic. She had found a ladder propped against the side wall of the house, placed directly beneath the second-floor bedroom window. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed, But the message was clear. Someone had tried to get in again. We didn't wait to find out if he would return. In less than a month, we moved to the other side of the city, to a smaller, more modern house with better security measures. We sold our old home quickly, determined to leave that nightmare behind. We tried to convince ourselves that the change would bring us calm, but the fear was still there, like a shadow that wouldn't disappear. Months passed, and as we unpacked boxes in our new home, Melissa found an old photograph of her grandfather, in which he appeared holding those same binoculars. She stared at it in silence, with a distant expression. Why those binoculars? Her words left me thoughtful, and in that moment a chilling idea crossed my mind, for the first time with clarity. What if that man wasn't interested in the binoculars themselves, but in the view they offered? Maybe he bought them precisely because he knew they had belonged to Melissa's grandfather, and he also knew who we were. Maybe he had been watching us long before we noticed, hidden somewhere, monitoring us in silence, waiting for the right moment to get closer. We will never know for sure, and maybe that is the most terrifying thing of all.